Welcome back to Freedom Love, and this is Kevin, and this is episode number 58. And today I'm going to discuss a couple of podcasts that I listened to over the last couple of weeks. The first one is Stefan Molyneux' Free Domain Radio, and he talks about, it's actually a podcast on the truth about Bill Cosby, and I wanted to bring up a few things about that. And then the second one is a Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and that one he interviews Andreas Antonopoulos about Bitcoin. So stay tuned for that in just a minute. And I just wanted to mention that I've been away for a month from this podcast and feel a little bit bad about it. I was on a pretty good roll there of doing a weekly show, and then I traveled to Colombia for a couple weeks, and that pretty much set me back. It was really tough because Colombia was great. Had a great trip down there. I was there for about 10 days, but I did not do any work down there, and that's not normal for me. Usually I'm kind of working and traveling at the same time, and this one was more just traveling, and it was just busy from the second I got there to the second I left. I think I had one afternoon where I just took off from my friends and went back and did some work on my laptop. I had a few things that I had to take care of, but other than that, I was just kind of checking in email once a day and keeping up just to the point where things weren't collapsing. But in any event, Colombia was great. I really had a good time. We went to two different cities, Cartagena on the Caribbean coast, and then spent about 5 days there, and then over to Medellin, which is in the mountains, and did about 4 days there, and then the rest of it was travel time. And it was, Colombia is quite a country. I won't go on and on and on about it today, but just kind of briefly, Cartagena it's got a lot of interesting history. There's a city center that's surrounded by walls, and so it just goes back to the old days when they would have to protect their city from ships coming in and maybe invading armies or what have you. And so the inner city is all protected by walls, and they keep the architecture as it was probably a couple hundred, a few hundred years ago. So not much has changed in terms of the architecture. There was some definite beauty to it. There's also, the downside is a lot of things look like they're in shambles. So Cartagena is, since it's on the water, it's got some beautiful areas, and it's right on the Caribbean, so the water's warm, the weather is really warm. It's actually pretty hot and humid, and people are really nice. The only thing about Cartagena is it's absolutely dirt poor. Did not expect this. Didn't really hear about this side of it, but there is so much poverty, and I could just give you some examples, but it just kind of seems like a lot of people are down and out and just kind of downtrodden, and there's not a lot of work, or they're just not motivated to work. And we saw people just kind of sitting on sidewalks all over the place, just kind of waiting, just watching life go by without really doing anything. So it's interesting that's kind of how that shaped out. And then the contrast was Medellin. So that's a plane flight away up into the mountains, and it's beautiful. The airport's about 45 minutes away from the city, and the ride in is just absolutely gorgeous. You go over these mountains, and Medellin is right kind of in a valley, so it's surrounded by mountains, and you kind of descend in there. It's super green. It actually rains quite a bit there, but the temperature is perfect, almost perfect year-round. It doesn't get hot, and it doesn't really get cold, so it's kind of like a San Diego with a little more rain. Well, probably a lot more rain, actually. So the Medellin is super modern, and it's got a very nice area. Well, it's got a lot of nice areas, but there's one part of town called Poblado, and that's kind of where a lot of the businesses are, and a lot of the expats are, and it's kind of like really the happening part of the city. And it is really, you wouldn't know that you're in a country that 10, 15 years ago was torn apart by the drug lords or the drug war. So in that area, it just seems like their business is booming, and they have a subway system, and then they have this kind of skyway, which is pretty cool, and you can get up there, and it's kind of like taking a ski lift over the city, and it's part of the commuter kind of the commuter line, and you can go up there and take pictures. And unfortunately, the really nice one was closed when we were there, but but there was another one that also is pretty nice, but it goes over some of the slums in Medellin, which is I don't think there are a ton of them, but there's definitely some poverty there as well. And I guess the most interesting thing about Medellin was, well, there's a lot of interesting things, but one of the things we did, and I feel a little bit bad about this now, but we took a tour of the Pablo Escobar estate, and it actually was just a little house in Medellin. So if you are not familiar with Pablo Escobar, he was basically running Colombia from, I don't know, like the mid-90s until the mid-2000s, and he was the dates might be wrong there, I'd have to look that up, but he was the king drug lord of not just South America, but actually the world for a time. And he was the richest man in the world, unofficially, of course. He just had this business worldwide of selling cocaine, and it was unbelievable. And so his power in Colombia well exceeded the president and anyone in government. So anyway, I basically took the tour because I was interested in the history, and just this is where they came from. I definitely didn't support this guy. He definitely, when he was around, they said there was about 10 people being murdered every day, and that was just normal. Like, that was just life in that area. Obviously things have changed for the better, but yeah, so anyway, he built a prison for himself at one point because he had more power if they thought, he was behind bars than he did if he was on the run all the time. So he basically built this prison, and then he turned himself in, but he still ran the business the same exact way. None of his freedoms were taken away, really. He was running the business from jail. And anyway, on the tour, we got to meet his brother, which is very odd because I don't know how many deaths this guy was responsible for. So I felt really bad. I know that a lot of local Colombians really hate the idea that there's a tour of this. I guess it would be like, touring Hitler's estate or something like that. I mean, obviously this guy wasn't quite that level of evil, but in any event, that was an interesting thing. I recommend Colombia as a place to visit. It's just absolutely fantastic, and it's better if you know Spanish. My Spanish, I think I mentioned before, is really pretty horrible, but we got by no problem, just fumbling around in broken Spanish, and we actually started some conversations with people, and we would speak broken Spanish. They would sometimes speak broken English, and it was kind of cool. I mean, I don't think that not knowing Spanish is a good reason to not go someplace like that, but definitely would help quite a bit to know some Spanish at least. And it's pretty cheap. It's definitely cheaper than the U.S. in general, but you can also spend a lot of money on things. But we stayed at an Airbnb that was like overlooking the city, and it was just a really amazing place. And we kind of calculated the cost, and it was probably about half of what you'd pay in like a major U.S. city. So, I mean, as far as that place went. So, yeah. So anyway, Colombia was great. I came back in the middle of November and I've just been really swamped. I've been focused on my website, Tri-Swim Coach. I'm putting a lot of effort into it and building up. It's a membership site right now, but the way I do it is people pay one time and they get access to everything. So it's videos and workouts and interviews and stuff like that, so they can train for a triathlon swim. And we have a good following. We have a good amount of people joining all the time, but they're not really getting a lot of attention, and they're not getting what I like about some of the online programs. They're not getting the group thing. So you join a membership site and you're probably doing it solo, or maybe you just don't know that many people, and then you're just kind of doing the whole thing solo. So it's not nearly as fun as if you can join in and have a bunch of people that are doing the same things you are, and then you kind of learn things together. So that's really exciting for me to put this together. We opened up I'm calling it a team. We opened up our team on December 1st, and we got 37 signups. So I was pretty happy with that. I think we could do a little bit better, but these people are paying either $15 a month each or $30 a month each. And most people are actually paying $30 because that's what I'm charging for new customers. These are the old customers. I gave them a deal. So this has been a really good thing, and but it also takes a lot more time. This first month, it's definitely taking a lot more of my time. Next month, it'll take less of my time because a lot of things are already in place. We're kind of figuring things out as we go this time. It's worked out fine, but there is just a lot of stuff that needs to needs to happen that I've never done before. Like I had to do a webinar, and that was a lot of setup and getting it done and getting people on the call. And but it's all been successful. Not yet to the point of being able to retire on this money, but it is definitely a success and adding to my income, which is nice. And it's also really fun, and a lot of people seem to be really having a good time with this training. So we just do like a training every month. There's like a contest, and we have people posting pictures and things like that. So my guess is that it'll be easier each month that we do it. It'll be a little bit easier, and it'll kind of run itself. I mean, of course, I'll have to get on these webinars and tell people what to do and that kind of thing. But that stuff is not that hard. It's more of all the setup and everything. So anyway, that's what I've been focused on, and just kind of trying to figure out the balance here. When I get back to San Diego, there's a ton of things to do. There's work, and then there's social stuff, and then there's like dating stuff. And I mean, it's just the way it's working here for me is so busy, and I'm always trying to balance things out because I also like to have some alone time. And so I have to kind of work that into every week. And then I'm also doing some shoulder rehab stuff. So anyway, it's a really busy time. And now we have the holidays coming up. So of course there's parties, and then I'm traveling up to see the family and in a couple weeks. And I've got all sorts of other things planned. And then I'm going to Panama at the end of the month. So that's where I'm at. But without further ado, I wanted to get to the couple podcasts that I wanted to highlight this week. And the first one is from Stefan Molyneux, and that's Free Domain Radio. And he did a show on the truth about Bill Cosby. Now, I love his truth about episodes. I don't listen to most of his podcasts. I did listen to him a lot hardcore, like in 2009, 2008, maybe 2009, and I listened to a ton of his shows. If you go back to his early shows, his focus is kind of showing how government is the family, and this is like the reason why things happen with government is because this is how most people were raised, and we're used to things like punishments and rewards. And he does a really good job of showing how this is, and it takes a lot of listening to a lot of podcasts to really get it. And once I listened to a lot of his shows, I kind of gave up the idea that politics was any way to change anything. So that really helped me along with that kind of an idea of like, how do I change things and how do I make the world better and things like that. So that's his podcast, but the truth about episodes are really good. I still listen to those. That's mostly what I listen to. And he'll take something in the news that's happening, and he'll do it, like if it's about a celebrity or something, he'll do a truth about. And this one was Bill Cosby, and Bill Cosby's been in the news because he is being accused of rape. I'm actually a big Bill Cosby fan. I always liked him. I never really watched his show much, but I like his stand-up comedy a lot, and I think he's really funny. But the point of bringing this up is that I think it was a really good show. It was an hour and 47 minutes, and it was a really, really good kind of dissected Bill Cosby's life and just talked about like how he grew up and everything that happened to him, and then how he really worked his butt off all throughout most of his life and built and then had the number one show for so many years. And he talked all about that, and then talked about his family. It was towards the end that he made an amazing point, and I want to play this clip for you right now, and then I'll talk about it a little bit after.
Many years ago, when I was doing my master's, I read Candide by Voltaire, where people try and make the world a better place, and the end result, which always stuck with me and struck me, the end result is tend your own garden. If you want to change the world, going out and facing the world and taking the megaphone of your abilities and talents to the world and blaring into the ear of the world doesn't seem to do it. It is not knowledge the world lacks, it's examples. Was Bill Cosby brilliant and flawed as he was? Was Bill Cosby, even allegations of sexual misconduct aside, did he embody the ideal in real life that he pretended to in the Cosby Show? He did not. He did not. I think that's why it didn't work. There's a weird alchemy that, 95% of communication is nonverbal. You have to do it in your own life. I think if you do it in your own life and you don't keep it a secret, whatever you're trying to do will spread to the world even more powerfully and and more permanently and more effectively than if you have the biggest sitcom in the world for almost a decade. I say this not because anyone's particularly interested in my life choices, but because we must learn from what didn't work in the past. Bill Cosby's genius, Bill Cosby's education, Bill Cosby's passion, Bill Cosby's workaholism, his dedication to what he did not work. Did not work.
Yeah, I fully agree with this, and the point is that it's not what you say, it's what you do, and it comes down to that. And you can talk all day, but if you're saying one thing and doing another, people are not going to believe you. So that's what it comes down to, and I think that can apply to whatever you're doing. You can't really fake it forever. You can't fake it for very long because people will catch on, and that does not really work. So on a brighter note, not that was a totally negative note, but on a brighter note, I also listened to, the last couple of days, I've been listening to this podcast that Joe Rogan did with Andreas Antonopoulos. And Joe Rogan has interviewed him, I think this is the third time, but this was the best one of the three. I thought it was amazing. From start to finish, this was just an amazing interview about Bitcoin. And he starts off with some of the basics of what it is and how it works. Andreas Antonopoulos is my favorite person to listen to in terms of Bitcoin. He seems to know everything, and he's really, really positive on the future and what it can do to change the world. And so I tend to listen to what he has to say, and he's a super brilliant guy. This section is about some futuristic stuff that I found really interesting, and I think that Andreas is correct here and throughout this podcast in that Bitcoin is the future, and it's just, obviously, at this point, it's not there yet. But anyway, take a listen to this, and we'll talk about it right after.
You don't see social media, you don't see email, and you certainly don't see digital money as much. Or if people see digital money, it's effectively Apple Pay, right? You have a thing and you go bloop, and it pays in galactic credits. Mm-hmm. But that's not very imaginative. That's just our current money on a phone.
Right. Yeah, they're just using placeholders.
Right. But the truly interesting technologies start happening when you break that mold and you create forms of money that didn't exist before and ways to use money that didn't exist before. So the ability, for example, one of the really revolutionary things about Bitcoin that I find fascinating is the ability for machines to own money. So up to now, only people can own money, or through legal fictions like corporations, groups of people can own money. But machines cannot own, operate, and exchange money on their own. Software systems cannot own money on their own. They have to have a human paying for things, right? So think about this concept, which is being discussed a lot in the Bitcoin community, called a distributed autonomous corporation or decentralized autonomous corporation or organization, DAO, DAC. Imagine a software agent that is able to maintain a Bitcoin balance and uses that to pay for its own hosting on, say, a web service. So it rents its own computer power.
So you essentially empower the software company, you servers.
You write
computer,
software,
right,
so that it can manipulate a Bitcoin account and then use that Bitcoin account to buy hosting, to copy copies of itself onto that hosting.
Isn't that
and
like
then
auto?
run itself.
I mean, isn't auto pay similar?
But hang on a second. Now imagine taking that a step further. Now imagine if that software system could create two varieties of itself, like by making a small change, and one variant of the software gets hosted here and one variant gets hosted there, and say it does an activity, like it creates content on blogs by aggregating news, and sells advertising for Bitcoin. And if this one's successful, it buys more hosting for itself. And if this one isn't successful, it shrinks the amount of hosting. So now you've got almost a fitness function, evolutionary effect going on. So now the most successful versions of the software grow in size and fund more of themselves. Now I could go out on Craigslist and hire some software developers to make its software better. You've essentially got an autonomous agent that's acting with money to propagate its own existence. That's never happened before. And I don't know what you could do with that. Probably some very weird, some very bad, some very good things all mixed together. But it opens a door to something that is completely crazy sci-fi level.
Yeah, that's just amazing stuff that Bitcoin can do. We're scratching the surface, and there's another part of the podcast where he talks about what the technology behind Bitcoin is and why the currency aspect of it, which is what everyone focuses on, is actually just a really small part. This is just the beginning of it. There's so many things that Bitcoin can do, and it's going to revolutionize real estate. It's going to revolutionize law, contracts, you name it. It's wills. Everything is going to be revolutionized at some point with Bitcoin, and it will happen. Like he said in the interview, he was talking about how it'll happen not over a gradual period of time, but it'll be like a sudden shift. It's kind of like the internet. And other technologies where it was just one day, you woke up and everybody is doing this thing like, talking on their cell phones. And so it's going to be a pretty sudden shift, and I'm looking forward to that. And I think from everything that he's saying and a lot of the smart people are saying, we're going to see that in a few years. I mean, it's really going to be a massive shift, and it's going to be exciting. And I think that this is opening up all kinds of job opportunities and business opportunities. And I mean, it's just a really exciting time to be involved in this, and even just to know a little bit about it is cool. And to think like, if you were all excited about the internet in 1992, I'm sure most people you knew had heard of it, but didn't know anything about it. And then one of the other things I wanted to mention about Bitcoin is a lot of people will say, well, I don't get how it works. How does it work? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like magic. But that's pretty much every technology that's ever come out, because if you think about just the recent one, the internet, nobody knew how it works. Nobody knows how it works now. I mean, explain to me how a page loads. I don't understand it, but I know that I can go to my computer and pull up a web page and it'll load. And I don't understand. I can't tell you all the intricacies behind it and how all that's happening, but it's happening and I'm relying on it. So that's the same type of thing with Bitcoin. Bits are being transferred and you're getting they're equivalent to money. And yeah, I don't understand the real technical details of it, but I get the fundamentals and I get the revolutionary aspects of it, and so I'm excited about it. That's all I really had today. I wanted to get back to the podcast and the show and touch base, and I'm really looking forward to December and 2015. This coming week, I'm going to be interviewing Andrew Farabee, and we're going to be talking about how to pivot in your business. I mean, he did this amazing pivot that I'm really impressed with, and so I want to talk to him about that. But so I hope all is well, and hope you're going out there and building freedom. And thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Every time